Hi, everyone. Welcome back to our channel, Joyous Awakening. I'm SomRa An'Ryka, ET Walk-In, Spiritual Awakening Teacher and Facilitator, and Sound Channel. And today, I'm going to be interviewing Jaraan Onai, channel of ET Ascended Masters, Angels and Archangels. Hello, Jaraan.
Hey, Somra, and everybody.
Welcome. We're going to have fun today. We are going to cover some really important foundational basis about what angels are, archangels, what the differences are from ETs, extraterrestrials, all kinds of different things, dimensions. We're going to cover a lot of ground here today. So we invite you to stay with us because we're going to get into some deeper teachings too, as I am going to be interviewing Archangel Michael through Jaraan, one of my favorite archangels, and he's going to be offering some teachings as well as we continue our discussion today. So let's get right into it. First of all, Jaraan, I just want to ask you, when did you start? We know you started channeling in the early 90s. Do you recall when you started channeling angels?
Um, that would have been about, I would say, the mid to late 90s when I started channeling angels.
Did you intend to on purpose, do you recall, or did it happen spontaneously?
I wonder, it could have been a little of both, actually. I deliberately reached out to the angels, but I have a feeling that that was also planned and encouraged intuitively or whatever, them reaching out to me and saying, hey, we're here too, that kind of thing. When I first started, of course, I was connected with the guides because that's what I knew to connect with, through the book opening to channel. It's what I learned where to start. And that was my preference at first. And then later on, it's like, oh, well, there's angels too. And, I had people asking about talking to angels. So it was like, well, yeah, to be able to do that too. And so it just kind of got just organically developed from there.
Yes. And of course, we know, and my perspective, you're one of the most extraordinary channels out there, and that you can bring through a variety of different, very high quality beings, not just one particular being or two. And so we have lots of different interviews on this channel. We're going to be having more with different ascended masters and angels coming. And so that's just a wonderful thing. And it's such a wonderful service you offer because to me, I can tune into the angels and I can interact with them, but to be able to talk directly back and forth very clearly through you to someone like Archangel Michael is profound. It's extraordinary, it's transformational. And folks, while you are listening as we're doing this, the angels and your personal angels and Archangel Michael and your guides are all working on you simultaneously. They're helping to open doors in your consciousness, facilitate healing. So while you're listening, if you have a particular request in your heart, just feel it in your heart, some sort of healing you'd like to experience. And who knows, maybe, as you witness this and listen to what Archangel Michael has to say, you might have some transformation occur. And we certainly wish that for you and intend that for you. So that's pretty cool. I wanted to ask you too, Jaraan, does it feel any differently when you're channeling an angel versus an ET ascended master or any ascended master?
That's a good question. Well, actually, all the different beings I channel feel a little different. I don't know how to say this exactly. Is it the quality, the frequency? Let's say probably the frequency feels different to me. It's no less light, bright, and uplifting, but there is definitely a different quality to it, a different essence. It's almost as though with each of the ascended masters I channel, you might associate them with a particular color, and this is strictly a metaphor. It's not literal. Whereas to me, all the angels are just different variations of clear, just really bright, clear energy. And that's probably the best way I can describe it. And that's not literally accurate, but it's a metaphorical way of describing the different sensations that I feel when I channel these different beings.
That makes perfect sense because one of those distinctions is angels, have that kind of purity. And we're going to talk with Archangel Michael a little bit more about those distinctions because they're very fascinating and what angels do, how they help humanity. So if you feel ready, let's get to it. How do you feel?
Sure. Yeah, my energy's already opening up for sure. So yeah, I'd love to just dive right in.
Okay, cool. All right. So we're going to be silent a moment while Jaraan leads us through a brief meditation and brings in Archangel Michael.
Beautiful. So welcome everybody just to bring your attention to your heart chakra. We're going to breathe into that space. Invite your body to relax as you breathe. As you continue to breathe and relax, envision a radiant golden light within the heart chakra, representing the purest essence of divine love, your own soul's presence. See and feel that light expand with every inhale, completely filling and surrounding your body in its radiance. If you have any questions or needs at this time, I welcome you to hold those in your heart just a moment. And let them go with love, knowing they've been acted upon by a very loving universe, and that your response is forthcoming in the manner most appropriate. And feel your gratitude for that response and for the ability to call it forth with grace and ease. And just breathe in that gratitude a few moments. Well, greetings, beloved one. This is Archangel Michael.
Greetings.
So
It's always a thrill to talk with you
always indeed.
and an honor. You, of course, are such an extraordinary being known throughout history. And so we're going to dive into some of that today. If you don't mind answering some of those questions to kind of clear things up and bring everyone up to the same page.
Certainly, we will do our very best to delight and enlighten.
Awesome. All right. So I've got my list of questions here, and I know just to kind of connect on this level, I started working with you in the mid '90s deliberately. No doubt you've been helping me here and there, and
For eons now, for
for
eons.
eons now, right? And I was doing, when I was getting into property clearing work, that was when it really, I actually began working with angels overall, but that's like came in the picture because you're kind of the one known to do clearing, clearing spaces and that sort of thing. The people who, my mentors at the time for property clearing, they talked about Archangel Michael. And so I remember getting to know you then, and that for lack of better words, the energy, the frequencies that you express through felt really cool. And I appreciated that strength of energy that comes through. And I would feel a sense of confidence in your presence and like an assuredness, like, we're really doing the work when we're doing property clearing. But also I soon began working with you personally, invoking you for feeling those sorts of states of being when I needed it. And that's one of your things you do, right?
Absolutely. One of many.
Yes, yes. We'll get into that in a few minutes. So, but yeah, so and then in the early 2000s, I really began working with you a lot more. I had done a lot of work with Archangel Raphael as a healer when was a hands-on healer a lot more, and so it's you started coming in the picture more. I don't know if that was me calling on you or if you were like, hey, we're ready for this next phase of your journey. But it's been such a thrill, such an honor. And I love your directness, your directness energy, because I'm pretty direct in my teaching. So we'll just roll with it. We might be pretty direct today, folks who are listening. We're just going to get right to the point to stuff.
Yeah, why not?
Why not? No time to waste. Okay. So, did you have any further comments before I get to the next question?
Well, one thing in particular that stands out, if I may briefly, in this whole adventure of interacting with humanity over the millennia, there's been different assumptions, conditioned assumptions that have been imposed that aren't necessarily exclusive or accurate. And one thing that stands out in particular is the idea that I, in particular, would have to be stern, and strength is not necessarily stern. I can be stern, absolutely, and once committed to a course, there is no deviation, there's no discussion. You just do it and get it done, right? But it's an interesting thing to note that a lot of people assume that because I am who I am and do what I do, that I have to be stern about it. And, I like to laugh as much as the next archangel. So,
A lot of people don't know archangels laugh.
well, it's like, this, how do you not revel in the glory of infinity, and the beauty thereof when you're aware of it, when you're a part of it, when you're a servant to it? It's just this glorious experience. But what I noticed is that a lot of times human beings will impose human ego personality traits onto angels that don't necessarily belong with the angel, even if the angel might demonstrate this, that, or the other trait with respect to different individuals that they interact with, right? Or in the case of like channeling, because there's many, many beings channeling us, right? So, but there's, something to do with the personality of that individual channel as well. So, where we see a lot of times people will argue, it's like, well, Archangel Michael acted this way through this channel and he acted that way through that channel. So is that really Archangel Michael? Blah, blah, blah. And, we're big enough to cover all the bases anywhere on the planet all the time. And that's just a tiny, tiny spectrum of our coverage area. And so, but to understand that every channel, every human instrument that we express through has some gates open, some gates closed, right? And they have particular traits that are very well developed and some that maybe are not so well developed. And that's not a plus or minus. It's not a pro or con. It's not a criticism of anybody. It's just that, you pour through the pathway that's there. And it's just like water flowing through the path of least resistance. And so if you notice what you think of as being inconsistencies, just consider that, right? Because our essence is our essence. It's unchanging. It does continue to expand. It very much like if you've ever seen a cumulonimbus cloud, a big storm cloud that's 30,000 feet tall, rolling through the atmosphere, you can see that cloud billowing and rolling and turning. And our presence, our consciousness, if you will, is doing that as it expands naturally. And that's a part of our evolution as angels. And angels do evolve. And we certainly evolve. And that's what it feels like. And you might say looks like, but that's what it feels like, is that constant, you might think of it as a slow motion billowing that occurs as we just naturally expand. Your own consciousness expands too, sort of kind of the same, but it doesn't always look the same. And especially if you're operating through a 3D viewpoint, if you have your polarity based binoculars on, then you're not seeing the full measure of what's possible and how you develop. You might tend to think of that as being more linear in nature, but it's really not. It's a multidimensional expansion that occurs for human souls as they evolve and incarnate and reincarnate and go through that very beautiful evolutionary process. And so just know that, yeah, I can laugh and I can smile. I can have a good time and I can kick ass.
That is for sure true. Especially in our property clearing work, a lot of times I'm doing my part, and of course the ET Ascended Masters who work with me are doing their part. And when I call you in, it's like, hey, just take care of this, and you get the job done on
Yeah.
your part. Yeah, the parts that you do. So awesome. Thank you
I
for
have a very long, long cosmic broom that I sweep places out with.
and it's full of light, right? So the light
Absolutely.
broom. Yeah, it's an illuminated broom. I'm going to
Exactly.
use that imagery.
Yes, multidimensional fiber optics, we would say.
Oh, wow, that is a great image. Yeah. Okay, cool. So, yeah, and you made some really great points there. Yeah, that, what comes through also is what's appropriate for the moment as well. Not just the channel, but and what the channel where their doors are open, what's allowed through you, what's needed for that person that you're channeling for in the moment, or that group, or those of you who are listening today to this video. It
Yeah,
can vary.
absolutely.
Yeah, it can vary. Okay. All right, cool. So, how did, and this may be a complicated question, so, you may can simplify it. How did angels come to be? And you can sort of weave in these other things about what's the distinction between, beings who are incarnating versus angels.
Yeah. That is a very good question and not necessarily complicated, but quite hard to communicate using 3D human language. Because on the one hand, it's a very simple thing, and on the other, the details are quite involved. Okay. So, but if you go back to the beginning, to call it a beginning, there really is no beginning. There is just the ongoing flow of isness, right? But everything is evolving. Even isness, or what you think of as God consciousness, is evolving, right? And so, somewhere along the way, when God, if you want to call it that, when the isness said, "What am I?" or "Who am I?" then out of its infinite wisdom and love, it began to demonstrate to itself what it is. And, here you might correlate that with the so called Big Bang as far as this universe is concerned. But the history goes much, much further back, if you want to think of things in terms of time, to that, oh, what am I? And then bang, all of what I am begins to appear in various ways, at various levels, in various expressions. And so that occurs just so that isness can become more aware of itself, can become more expansive in its experience of itself. And that same thing, if you have to put it on a timeline, which is really not, but if you have to put it on a timeline, that's billions and billions of years of unfoldment, of self-discovery, if you will. And there really is not a starting place in time for that. There merely is existence experiencing itself, or isness experiencing itself. And so we were a part of that initial, okay, here's a part of what I am. And as a result of that, then it's like, okay, in the discovery of, okay, this exists. Now, what is this? What is an angel? What is a guide? What is a soul? Okay. What is a star? What is a quark? All these things came into existence simultaneously, but then different beings become aware of them at different levels at different times over eons. But we were part of that initial burst of consciousness manifesting, if you will, and being very, very close to the original source. We are manifestations not only of that source, but servants of it as well. And so that's our way of relating our origins, if you want to think of it that way.
It's so beautiful. And as you're talking, I mean, particularly when you're talking about the beginning, which, like, of course, there was no beginning, but that whole question, and then all of this manifests, so to speak. Just feeling that time period and how beautiful that was, how extraordinary that was, and of course, all time is now, so it's still now, a part of the now. So, so you said that being closer to that original source, Can you elaborate on what you mean by that?
Hmm. Well, you might think of it as like Source's firstborn.
Mm.
Uh, in human language, it's probably the best we can do to describe that. Just being a firstborn of Source, right? Um, in humanity today, you have generations, right? You have potentially even like uh, great grandparents, grandparents, parents, children, and on through time as that unfolds. Well, your a person's great grandchild is still a manifestation of their consciousness. Going all the way back to that genetic lineage, but they're several steps removed from that initial birthing, if you will. And so, if you think of us as being like, if isnness is the great grandparent, then we would be the grandparent, the next in line. And then on down you go in the manifestations. It's about the best way we know to make sense of that.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's
the frequency, if we speak to it in more of our language, then what we're speaking of is a frequency range, which isn't technically accurate. It's more of a presence range. Uh, it's colors or sounds, if you will, within the ocean of isness that are so vibrationally attuned as they're almost indistinguishable from the original isness.
beautiful. Yeah, I'd say that's a fairly good analogy that hopefully folks can get a sense of or understand. And so, does that mean? And you say angels evolve. Does that mean you're evolving slower, so to speak, or in a different way than souls incarnating?
Yeah, I would say in a different way because, in a lot of respects, our purposes are different. The purposes of angels is very different than the purpose of a soul. Um, and so the evolutionary path would have to be different as well to accommodate that. Uh, in an angel's existence, evolution is not something you have to try to make happen. It's just built into the nature of an angel. And there's no resistance to that evolution. It just occurs. Now, the same could be said of a soul, a human soul, for example, since we're now on Earth interacting in this context. Um, but souls have a different kind of interest, a different kind of motivation, even for evolution. The role is different in some ways. And I would argue that it's even more expansive in some ways. Um, the soul is capable of, one way of describing it is they're capable of a lot more, of accommodating and expressing a lot more. And whenever you put things into a polarity based perspective, it's still limited to like one slice of the pie at a time. A soul is not going to attempt to accommodate all possible evolutionary paths in a single lifetime or even in a single 100 lifetimes because there's just too much. There's absolutely too much to do in that respect. So it takes linear time, if you want to think of it that way. It takes more accurately lots and lots and lots of experience to accommodate all the desires a soul might have. For example, if you think of creative expression, well, creative expression is one thing, but here on Earth, you may notice that there is a multitude of ways that creative expression can manifest. There's music, there's arts, there's all kinds of things, writing. And to be a master of any of those takes experience. And in polarity, experience takes time. Um, Angels evolution is to, if you want to think of it as emulating source or serving source, it ends up being the same thing. It means really the same thing from our perspective, more impeccably. And so it's just also a matter of experience to become more and more an expression of source consciousness. That said, it's done without the limitations of misunderstanding that humans get into when they dive into polarity, because you can forget, we never do. And so there's a clear, ongoing, conscious unfoldment that we observe, essentially. The intention is built in. An angel doesn't have to think, okay, and now I need to learn how to do this, or next lifetime, which, we talk more about that later, but angels don't have lifetimes in the same sense that a human does, a human soul does, when incarnating. So it's just one long, expansive expression of isness. And it just gets bigger, the same way that cloud gets bigger in the sky. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's fascinating. So eventually, might you transcend this created universe like a soul would?
Probably not in the way that you mean, because even that idea doesn't have the same meaning.
Right.
Uh, to transcend this universe really doesn't mean anything to me, because technically I already do.
Yeah.
This is just, what you call your universe is like a big toe for me.
Right, right. And that's a whole other topic. Those of you listening, if the concept of there are multiple universes is big for you, don't worry about that right now. But this is enough to kind of get a sense of more of what angels are about and the distinctions. And so it sounds like when you said there aren't the misunderstandings through your evolution, therefore you don't accrue karma, so to speak,
Right.
misunderstandings that then you have to work out later.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's pretty handy. I'm a little envious, but hey, we were all doing our thing.
Exactly. It's all a part of the all.
Right, right. And there's a lot of misconceptions out there about angels and archangels. So I want to clarify several of these things. We're already kind of on that track. Uh, Humans tend to project because of conditioning and the circumstances of the ego and polarity an idea of a hierarchy with the angels. And while there is a certain order to things, I think possibly it's not a rigid hierarchy like a lot of humans project onto that. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, that sounds pretty correct. The idea of hierarchy is really just a model, right? I would look at that as simply a model for describing an organization, right? And so hierarchy has nothing to do with quality, for example. Uh, 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 an archangel is not better than a cherub or whatever. Um, they're just different expressions or different frequencies of expression, different frequency bands of expression, if you will, of the all. And while each may have a slightly different role, or maybe a dramatically different role in some cases, the underlying purpose is still the same, to serve creation, to serve the expansion of isness, if you will. And so that takes different forms depending upon the spectrum, and we would refer to like each spectrum of angels as a spectrum, right? So whatever the names you have for us here, all those different levels are just spectrums of consciousness, spectrums of influence, if you will, but none technically higher or lower than another, just you know in its own frequency band.
And just like with souls, each one of you is awesome in your own expertise, so to speak. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And we don't get together and go, wow, uh, you've been a guardian angel now for 50 millennia. When are you going to grow up? Uh, that that doesn't even make sense in our context.
And with that too, humans have a lot of this the hierarchy model in their mind or mindset, between 3D, 4D, 5D, and so on, of dimensions and beings in higher dimensions, and have almost a worshipfulness, or like, oh, you're so great, Archangel Michael. I mean, you are, but so are we all. We all are grand beings, creations of Source. So, what would you say to someone like that who, I mean, I think prayer is a beautiful thing, but particularly when you understand where we're coming from, it's just like, not because you're greater than us or more powerful or more important, but respect, definitely, as approach any being with respect, but also it's just like calling upon you to share your expertise to assist in a situation, but not, oh, great, mighty Archangel Michael, please help me, right?
Correct. Those things really mean nothing to us. Those kinds of accolades mean nothing. Um, I don't need your worship as such. Yeah, we're awesome, absolutely awesome, no doubt about it. And you are awesome. And when you think about it, and especially if you understand it coming from polarity based, especially coming from polarity based reference point, what you see is who you are, right? And if you don't own that, then you will automatically just project that outside to whatever entity is demonstrating it. But it's still you. Our greatness is your greatness that's yet unrecognized. We know that. You may not know that yet, but we know that. And so you're really talking about yourself and you just don't see it yet. And we're happy to reflect your greatness back to you. We're happy to reflect your strength to you. We're happy to reflect your determination and motivation and commitment and joy and bliss and all those things back to you. And we wish to goodness that you would just embrace it, own it for yourself, own what is you already. That you'll find yourself not only happier, but far more successful and productive if you do this.
Yes, that is so beautiful. And I know a lot of times when I call upon your assistance or the other angels or archangels, I I feel that assistance, and we go through a process or whatever it is. I and I feel such gratitude. To me, like often the books on angels say, angels don't need our thank yous. You don't need any of that. But gratitude is a state of being in the universe, and it's always a beautiful thing in all situations to be in a state of gratitude towards anyone, any being, and ultimately it's all just Source expressing through each of us.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one thing that you're sharing there really is indicative of the human ego's tendency toward transactional interactions, right?
Right.
I do this for you, you do this for me. If you do something for me, then I'm going to be really grateful to you. No, I don't need. None of us need your thank yous, but you need to be grateful because it's about you and your consciousness evolving. Um, Gratitude is the open door for more. If you don't think of them as blessings or gifts or whatever, gratitude opens that door. I don't need your gratitude, but you absolutely do need your gratitude. And to acknowledge those participants with you in your evolutionary process, whether it's a friend, a coworker, an angel, a guide, Source itself, your soul, uh, that's just wise. That's prudent. That's, you know, divine consciousness in action. To not do that basically is to really ignore and dismiss how divine consciousness really works. So it's quite prudent to practice gratitude.
Yeah, really great point. And also another point we ought to make here is that you angels don't feel unappreciated. You don't have egos like that. And so humans are conditioned to believe, like you don't want to upset the parent, or the parent won't come back and help or share love and whatever dysfunction a person was brought up in. Angels are not like that. It's not like they can piss you off, right? and, and then you won't come back and help, or and then angels, I mean, people can project all of that on, and that's not how the relationship works.
Not in the least. We're not nearly that petty.
Yeah.
That's definitely a human ego trait, not an angelic trait. You can't hurt our feelings, even if you're very upset with us. You're not going to hurt our feelings. We understand. Uh, it's important also to understand, though, it's like you are truly responsible for your own evolution. But the more you accept that responsibility, the more resources you have access to. And a lot of people don't understand that. It's like, well, I can't do this. I need help, whatever. It's like, well, no, you can do that and you get help when you own it. It's like, there's a way. I may not understand how at the moment, but there's a way. You have the saying here, where there's a will, there's a way. And that's an intention. And an intention is not something you think of. It's a heart directed, a heart empowered choice, basically. And when you make a heart empowered choice, that is something that's aligned with your divine ideal, then you're automatically saying yes to all the resources, angelic, ascended master, or otherwise, that are required to fulfill that intention. But can you own that? Can you accept that? Uh, where we see people falter a lot of times is that they'll get tangled up with this whole worthiness thing, or it's like, I'm not worthy, or I have to be subservient, and all that kind of stuff. No, no, there's not a worthiness quotient that you have to reach before you qualify. You are source manifest, same as an angel, well, in your own way, but it's the same expression, that isness manifested all of us, right? And so we're all perfection in whatever form we happen to occupy in the moment. The difference is that if you're in a polarity based world like planet Earth right now, you're probably not even remotely close to fully aware of how grand and glorious you really are as a manifestation of source. And so that's the only difference. Angels have never forgotten how grand and glorious they are as a manifestation of source. And so we carry that reminder with us everywhere and to everyone who is open to it. And so, what we invite is that you just be open to yourself, be open to your heart, be open to your truth, your loving truth. And all kinds of wonderful things can manifest as a consequence of that. But you do need to be discerning about what is, in fact, your loving truth, not what you were taught and told, but what arises from within you, because that's your love, that's your light, that's your wisdom arising from within you. And that's how it works. That's the only way it works. And either do it that way, or you will, of course, suffer the consequences of unconsciousness. And that's not a negative thing. It's not a criticism. It's a fact. So awaken to the light and love within you, and all kinds of cool stuff happens all by itself.
A beautiful, endless teaching that we all need to practice on a regular basis. And the more you do, the more you expand into it. And those of you listening who are aspiring to even ascension, I mean, that's a key piece to it, is through that expansion and that allowing love. It could be said that that's what ascension is in a nutshell. You keep allowing love, allowing love, allowing love until you fully embody love, and your body turns into a pure state of love and light.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, really, from our perspective, the ascension path could be embodied in, I am love. How love am I?
Mm.
And you just keep answering the question, how love am I? You ask, consciousness answers. You ask, consciousness answers, because there's really no end. There's no end, to the expansion possible.
How love am I? That's an odd
Yeah, I know
question.
that's not grammatically correct, but that sticks in your head, won't it?
And it's not necessarily how much love am I. It's just how love am I. Is that similar to how am I love?
Yeah, how many ways, or to what degree, if you will, to what degree am I love? To what extent am I love? Okay. And then, you ask that question, open your mind and heart to awareness. Universe happily shows you, Wonderful. You embrace that, you own that. Then you ask again, to what degree am I loved? And again and again and again, you just keep repeating the process until you're fully conscious of your oneness with source. And then there's a whole nother leg of the journey after that.
Right. And folks, when we're talking about this, we're not talking about in one sitting. We're talking about a practice over time throughout your life, day to day. And that's steady progress, that's steady evolution. And also, the term unconditional love means unconditional. So there's no conditions to receiving and to experiencing source love. And your support as well. Angels are operate from a state of unconditional love. So, like I was saying earlier, no one could upset you or anything like that, and that you won't help later if they're not grateful enough, or any of those polaric ideas, egoic ideas.
No, no, not at all. As a matter of fact, I'm glad you actually said that way, because it gives us an opportunity to say this. It's like, it's not that we will deny you, but you might deny you unconsciously without even realizing it. Because gratitude opens doors. If you're not in that space of an open door, then we can't intervene without your consent. We can't support you without your consent. We can't enhance without your consent. And that gratitude creates a resonance, if you will. It creates a gateway, if you will, between you and that which you aspire to experience, and all the support that's required to achieve that.
Mm.
But close your heart down, you close your process down, you close your evolution down.
Right. And so some folks will say, well, I call my angels and nothing happens, or I don't feel them, or I don't hear anything. And of course, you all support angel support in various ways. And it's not because you've withdrawn from the person. It may be just that they're not able to perceive it in that moment, but the love is always there. And sometimes, it's like the question, why do you angels and archangels show up for people, like even visually sometimes, but not for others? And that's kind of a complicated question, or not why this time but not this other time. You're responding always to a number of factors in a situation, always attuned to the divine and the divine will. Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely. And there are so many factors that can influence what someone may or may not experience, right? The help is always there, it's always offered. You're never without it. It does come down oftentimes to a question of how receptive are you. And a lot of times people are receptive, they're absolutely receptive. Or in what ways you're receptive. Um, Quite often we notice that people will look for a response in one direction when it's already coming from another direction, but because they don't see it, because they're so focused on the direction they're looking, where they expect it to come from, that even when it lands right there beside them, they don't notice. And so they don't receive it. And it's also understanding that many times, not always, but many, many times, it's like you're looking for the sparkly wrapping paper when it's just a brown paper bag. That's how the answer comes. And if you don't accept that, if you're not willing to see it in the brown paper bag, then there's no amount of sparkly that's going to help you along either. So, that's where an exercise of humility is so important, because the universe is really technically indistinguishable from you. But that doesn't mean that human egos, consciously and unconsciously, deliberately and by default, will absolutely create barriers of perception that prevent awareness of that oneness with source. And that's really all it is. Nothing has to change ever, really, but your awareness. And as your awareness expands, then you get in touch with all these things that you aspire to experience. You much more easily allow them into your experience because of that growing awareness. And God, if you will, isness never says no, but unconscious egos say no all the time, even while the conscious part is saying, and we use the word conscious loosely, but the conscious part is saying, gimme, 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 help me, help me, help me. But the unconscious part is saying, no, I have to do it myself because I'm not worthy of that degree of love. And then, your angels are standing there scratching their heads going, okay, just be accepting. Just know that you're worthy because you exist, not because you have to qualify through some behavioral routine. In Christian religions and some of the others perhaps as well, they talk about grace. You're saved by grace, as it were. Well, all that really is just accepting the gift. You're humbly accepting the gift, the blessing, the benefit, etc. That's all that is. You're not disqualifying yourself. You don't have to qualify yourself. Just stop disqualifying yourself.
Yeah, I have a saying, particularly in stressful times, when there's an uncertainty about an outcome or what's unfolding, and it's triggering discomfort. It's like I welcome grace. I declare grace. I stand in grace. I allow grace. I just love the essence of what that means and how that came to me, and it's been very, very powerful. Like, a relaxation occurs, and therefore an openness and receptivity, right?
Absolutely.
Which is all about the grace is always here, but it's about that receptivity, and the barriers to that receptivity are like what you just said, beliefs about self-negating beliefs
Yeah.
about worthiness a lot of times.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing to understand, not that we have to harp on it necessarily, but just understand that your soul is guiding you through whatever kind of process you've got to go through to get to that place of receptivity. And it will absolutely drag you kicking and screaming to that place of receptivity. Or you can just start now practicing receptivity.
So you don't
You're going
have
to
to
get
get
there one way or the other.
Yeah, so you don't have to get to that place of where your things are really difficult in your life. A lot's happening at once. So you will surrender. A lot of our listeners know there's lots of talk about surrender. That's a whole other subject. What does that really mean? What does that really feel like? And it's often expressed as a uncomfortable contact, just being brought to the place of having to surrender. What if you don't have to be brought to that place if you just practice now? And of course, humility, like you mentioned, that's intricately tied to that surrender.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's understanding too that humility has nothing to do with humiliation. Those are two completely different things. Humility is really a deep, deep wisdom. Okay. Um, you can think of it as just accepting your place in the universe, not the place you were conditioned to believe is your place in the universe, but your actual place in the universe, which is extraordinary. Okay. Not filthy rags, not worms in the dirt, but not that there's anything wrong with either one of those, but you're extraordinary. And it's accepting that. It's accepting connection with oneness. And, even the idea of connection implies separation, or that separation can exist, but that's a word used here in polarity. There is just the oneness. There is just that essence of oneness, which is very hard to understand from a polarity-based perspective. But mind's trying to figure it out. The rational side of the human brain trying to figure it out, you're going to struggle. But if you'll just bring your attention to your heart, be with your heart, listen to your heart, because your heart understands things in a completely different, nonlinear way that can make what seems like very challenging concepts quite obvious. And yeah, understanding that you are heirs to infinity, accepting that possibility, and then what's the evidence start to manifest.
So really with surrender, it can be said this way, we're surrendering our ego mind's ideas about things, about ourselves, about the situation, and surrendering to the greater truth and presence within the heart to then show us what true reality is
Yeah,
in any situation.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Wonderful. Okay. This is awesome stuff. So everybody listening, just take a deep breath with that as we radiate supportive energy. And we invite you to just be in a receptive state right now, as much as you can. Receive the love that's with you right now, your own personal angelic support, your own guides and angels, as well as us facilitating. Let these ideas roll through you, work their magic, opening doors in your consciousness, opening new feeling states. You're so worthy and deserving. It's just the fact. Yes. Okay. We're gonna, yeah, Michael's just beaming. I love it. Thank you. Aim to be as relaxed as you can. You don't have to understand everything right now. Since this is a recording, you can pause it, you can come back. If you can relax your mind, open your heart already knows these truths, and it's going to get you further faster. And yeah, open you to beauty is always a good thing.